Welcome back to JKPRising for another Bioshock 4 discussion. Today we're going to talk about, will the developers play it safe for Bioshock 4 and return to Rapture? And if so, is that necessarily a good idea? A few months ago, I uploaded a video talking about how Bioshock 4 is going to be highly creative and innovative, quoting the developers of Bioshock 4, and a fellow subscriber or fellow follower commented one of the following comments. No, they're just going to play it safe and we're going to revisit Rapture again. Is this really a bad thing? Well, no, so long as they do it right. The game needs to be the same, but different. We're going to be in Rapture. There's going to be plasmids and splicers in the whole game. But what we need is an emphasis on survival horror. On the surface, Bioshock is an action shooter, but to its core, it's always relied on the strange and creepy atmosphere. This is why I hated Infinite so much. We went from a dark, creepy environment splicing up and killing children, to survive to riding roller coasters at the circus. I wasn't a big fan of Bioshock Infinite either. Only thing I really enjoyed about that game was Songbird. I know that says not so much about me as a Bioshock fan, but I wasn't a big fan of it for the art style. I thought it was very cartoony, and I loved that dark, grimy, rustic feeling that I got from the first Bioshock and Bioshock 2. And I love that dark atmosphere, and that obviously really wasn't in most of Bioshock Infinite. I'm not saying Infinite is a bad game, it just didn't really pander that well to me compared to the second game, or the first game. Going back to the topic, do you think the developers would play it safe and return to Rapture? Is that a good idea, or is that not so good? Because we've been to Rapture numerous times, the first game obviously, the second game, and the third game. So do you want to go back to Rapture a fourth time? Would that be a good idea, or are the developers running out of ideas, or could they make a fourth visit justice? I replied to this comment and I said the following. Well, if they do go back, we have a couple options. Number one, a game set before Rapture's fall, so a functional city, and as the game progresses, the city starts to deteriorate. And then a possible ending for that could be maybe at the very end of that game, it could start where Bioshock 1 started. 2. Set after Bioshock 2, the city is really fucked up and we have some type of story. I don't know what story that could be, but some type of story in a very deteriorating city. This could be great for survival horror as the city is almost destroyed. That brings me to another suggestion. I did notice in the first Bioshock game, it was more survival horror-esque. I thought Bioshock 2 kind of dropped that a little bit, and there was none of that really in Bioshock Infinite, or not as much as the first two games, and definitely not as prominent as the first Bioshock game. And I know a lot of people really enjoyed that about the first Bioshock, how it was a shooter at heart, but behind the curtain, when you take away the shooter aspects, there's a dark story there, and it is survival horror in some aspects. So if we return to Rapture again in an even more deteriorating city, post Bioshock 2, I think the entire game could be deemed as survival horror, because the whole city is falling apart, and I don't know what kind of story we could tell, but the city would be so destroyed, so gone at that point, that we could see some real impressive tactics on how to scare the player. If the story's going to be set beyond Bioshock 2, and the city is so gone at this point, I can only imagine that we're going to be outside in the water a lot like in Bioshock 2, but you couldn't use combat underwater in Bioshock 2. You can only walk throughout the city aimlessly, or at least where the game would allow you to walk. And that's another cool point. If we do go back to Rapture, and if we are allowed to explore the city via underwater more, make it open world where you can explore different hubs of Rapture, like an open world Rapture. It's a massive sandbox, no pun intended because sand's above water, but it's a massive sandbox where you could explore the city fully underwater, no barriers, or at least a big range of walking. We could see more underwater combat, or maybe some type of wildlife that you would face. Sharks, octopus, giant squid, some type of creepy ass element in the underwater parts. You have to navigate through the broken city of Rapture in underwater. If we go the other option where I talked about a functional Rapture city, and at the end it could be where Bioshock 1 takes place, like a prequel to the series, that would be pretty cool too, but it wouldn't really be much survival horror unless it gets to the latter parts of the game where the splicing and the atom becomes more unstable. We could see more of that. I do think though that a post Bioshock 2 world would be more scarier than a functional Rapture world, but those are just my opinions. What are your opinions? Leave them in the comments below. Do you think it would be a good idea for Bioshock 4 to return to Rapture? Is it a good idea to have Rapture as the entire game setting? Maybe a piece of Bioshock 4 goes back to Rapture? Or is it a bad idea to include Rapture for the fourth time, and do you want a different metropolis city instead? My name is James of JKPRising. Bioshock 4 information, you are already in the right place JKPRising. If you like anything I had to say in the video, please leave a like on the video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the support, and stay tuned for some more Bioshock videos here on JKPRising. I'll see you next time.